Many people in the US will say that socialism would never work here.
How would that work exactly?
It's been tried over 100 times in the last 100 years, and it's never worked.
Except we already have it, but it only exists for one class of people. Billionaires. I'm of course talking about public subsidies for pro sports stadiums. In the simplest of terms, that is when taxpayer money, your money, goes to billionaires and helps pay for a stadium so they can reap all the benefit. And this is a thing that persists everywhere in this country, and I was inspired to talk about it even further because of some recent news out of the state of Kansas, where they got one of the worst deals in American history. The state of Kansas is giving the Kansas City Chiefs $1.8 billion to fund their new stadium. The most public money ever on record for a stadium. And in this brand new state-of-the-art stadium, they will have less seats. They will have about 65,000, which is about 10,000 lower than their previous stadium, Arrowhead Stadium. And not to go Econ 101 on you, but if you have the same demand for a thing and the supply of that thing decreases, then you will end up paying more for that thing. So the Chiefs fans, who are already paying $1.8 billion for the stadium, will now have to pay more money to go to each game. So far, seems great for everyone involved. Third thing to note, the state of Kansas will own the stadium. That's great, right? They'll rent out the stadium to the Chiefs for $7 million, not billion, per year. But that $7 million rent doesn't even go back to the state of Kansas. It goes into an account which the Chiefs operate to pay for things like repairs and maintenance and parking and vendors. Money they would have spent anyway, so basically the Chiefs are getting to play in the stadium for free. But the real kicker is that the Chiefs, who don't own the stadium, get to retain 100% of the revenue that comes from it. That is tickets, that is parking, that is concessions, that is when Taylor Swift or any huge artist plays a concert in that stadium, the Chiefs keep the money from that, not the state of Kansas. So the state of Kansas owns the stadium, but they are not entitled to making revenue from it. Again, I want to remind you that the taxpayers are paying $1.8 billion for this. It really is impossible to overstate just how much money that is. And you can sort of start to understand selling out your whole state if you're like some spineless politician who just wants to hang out at a stadium in a suite. Here's another kicker. The state has to pay for food and drinks in the suite. They don't even get that comped. There is not a single conceivable way in which this is possibly a good idea for anyone in Kansas who is spending money to make this happen. But these sort of stadium deals consistently happen because people get sold on a couple bills of lies. The biggest lie people are told about public money for stadiums is that it's an investment. Think of how much economic benefit that is going to come from this. And people believe this lie because of a second lie, which comes from consulting firms who are paid to make up data to support the first lie. Anytime you see a report or an article that says, well, this stadium is going to generate, let's say, $2 billion of economic benefit for X area, that number came from somewhere. And it came from a consulting firm that was paid by the team to say that exact number. For the state of Kansas, I want to go to the exact press release they put out. They said that this new stadium will bring over $1 billion in annual impact. And then you scroll down a bit and you see that a fact of the agreement and the independent economic impact study can be found here. You go to that economic impact study and you see that it was done by Canyon Research Southwest Incorporated. So obviously the next thing you do is you go to the website of Canyon Research Southwest Incorporated and you see on their very outdated website that they are a multidisciplined real estate consulting firm providing a wide range of services to the development, investment, financial, and municipal communities. So what does that mean? That means that the Chiefs paid them to do exactly what they wanted them to do. When you look at this impact study that Canyon Research Southwest has done, and you look at the source of the data that they're coming up with that says there's going to be $1 billion of impact, they say applied economics. They don't link it anywhere. They just say, basically, hey, you've got to trust us, bro. And that's how this entire thing operates. You got to trust us, bro. I'm filming this on the same day that the Commanders release new renderings for what their new stadium is going to look like. also funded with a bunch of public money. And they put out this nice deck that sounds great in theory, and then they put the source, Convention Sports and Leisure. No normal person knows what that is. So of course you look up what Convention Sports and Leisure is, and you find out that CSL is the leading advisory and planning firm specializing in providing consulting services to the sports, entertainment, convention, and leisure industries. That just means teams pay them to say exactly what they want to say, so that the teams can then go and say, hey, look how great this thing is, give us your money. And it works almost every time. So why does the lie of an economic boom have to be held up by the lie of the consulting firms? Because the idea of the economic boom itself is a lie. That's what the real data shows us. That's what it showed us for decades. Furthermore, Canyon Research claims they are using the Implan model to come up with that number. If you look up the Implan model on Google, you'll see one of those first results. Implan model criticism. And I know everyone's least favorite thing to do in a video like this is to look at an academic paper for a second, but that's exactly what we got to do for just a moment. This paper, The Economics of Stadium Subsidies, a Policy Retrospective by J.C. Bradbury, Dennis Coates, and Brad R. Humphreys, is a really good one, and I think it's a pretty simple one if you've never really read an academic paper like this. It's pretty palatable. These are three economists who could broadly be generalized as sports economists, stadium economists. They study this sort of thing. And in here, they go into why these stadiums never deliver the promises they claim to. The very first line of the introductions, they say stadiums consistently demonstrate that sports stadiums have little to no tangible economic benefits on host communities, and thus typical public subsidies tend to exceed any meager economic benefits they may provide. Despite the universal agreement among economists that sports venues are poor public investments, elected representatives continue to subsidize their construction. I'll link this paper and more below. You can get into the real nitty-gritty if you want to, but you can see economists all say that these never live up to expectations. That all this money that it promises to deliver back to the economy, it doesn't really happen like that. And I think it's very easy to be lost in the economics of it all. Is it worth it? Is it not worth it? I think we just need to keep coming back to. We're giving billions of dollars of taxpayer public money that could be used for literally anything else. And we're handing it to the wealthiest people in America. And in doing so, they grow their pockets. Like, look at the Kansas example. Kansas owns the stadium, but the Chiefs literally get all the money. The Chiefs are owned by the Hunt family, who are worth about $25 billion. And yet every time you go and you buy a hot dog at a Chiefs game, they'll get a little bit richer because the state of Kansas thought that was a good idea. And the Kansas example is interesting because their next door neighbor, Missouri, they basically told the Chiefs, no more, kick rocks. It was the people of Missouri who voted at 58% on no of basically extending a sales tax that would have helped out to renovate the Chiefs Stadium. But in Kansas, it wasn't up to the people. It was up to the Legislative Coordinating Council Committee, who voted unanimously, both Republican and Democrat alike, to approve this public money. And this is why elections are important. The chair of this committee is Republican Ty Masterson, who is running for governor of Kansas. The guy who screwed over the whole state now wants to be in charge of it. In a case like this, when you let the people decide for themselves what is in their best interest, they'll see what's really going on. And I understand that people are represented in government by the people they voted for, but I think in a case like this, where they want billions of dollars in public money, that should just be a direct vote, where the individuals can decide, do they want to screw themselves over or not? And still, people can watch this whole video up to now, they can know all the information that they do, and they can still tell me how this one will be different. It's like the meme, well, it's never worked before, but it could work for us. It won't. It will not work for you. They will take your money, and they will make money off your money. You are subsidizing them when public money is involved at all. Another thing people will say to try to cope is they'll say that the money isn't actually being used for the stadium, it's being used for the infrastructure. You're paying for the stadium. In cases of public subsidies, the public accepts the risk, the private, in this case the billionaires, get the profit. It's a direct handout to those who need them least. And I'll just say that it can be done the other way. Billionaires can and sometimes even do pay for it themselves. The most state-of-the-art in the arena right now, the Intuit Dome in Inglewood, California, owner Steve Ballmer just paid for it himself because he wanted to do it, not because he claimed it to be an investment. Of course it is not, because if these things were great investments, every rich guy in America would be lining up to pay for a stadium themselves, which is why they don't. But put yourself in their shoes for a second. Say you're a super rich guy and you own a pro sports team. Why would you pay for your own stadium when you see just how easy it is to get someone else to pay for it for you? Happens in DC, it happens in Kansas, it happens in New York, it happens in Denver, Colorado, it happens in Nashville. Why not? The tide looked like it was shifting. The Missouri deal with Virginia saying no, and now it might have shifted back the other way. But it's not too late. There's still stuff we can do. Number one thing you can do is learn as much about this as possible. Become educated. So every person you talk to, you can say, actually, that's not true. Actually, this is a terrible deal for us. Actually, the billionaires are robbing us blind. Number two, you got to call out lazy reporting, which I've done. Because often news outlets, reporters, they'll just pick up what the teams tell them. They'll say, hey, there's $3 billion of economic benefit coming. And that's just what the general public will believe, because why not? That's what they're being told. You got to say, hey, that's not vetted information. That's not a fact as you're treating it to be. And of course, you can get locally involved. If there's even a whiff of this happening in your community, you can let it be known that you don't want it there. You don't want to pay for someone else's expensive toy, because there's real problems in this country that could be solved with the same taxpayer money that we pay. And as we move forward in time and awareness grows for this sort of thing, each one of these that's announced becomes more and more inexcusable. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I appreciate you sticking it out to the end if you did. As you can tell, I'm quite passionate about this sort of thing. I hope you found it interesting, mildly engaging. Maybe you learned a thing or two, got a couple wheels turning in your head. I'll leave some resources below. And billionaires, I'll leave you on this. If you want to get a stadium built, I think it's time you get those bootstraps tightened and you pull them all the way up. GoFundMes and bake sales out in front of the church are both viable options. We're not paying for this any longer.